Hello, Wealth Tycoons. Today we have brought you an amazing story about a boy who started with nothing. This story is about heart, determination, and a burning desire to do well. People worldwide know him as Jack Daniel, whose idea was to make Jack Daniel's Tennessee whiskey. Jack's story is one of overcoming hardship. This man didn't just live, he thrived. He was born poor, lost his parents when he was a child, and had to deal with every problem you can think of. Let's open this story like a fine whiskey and find all the details we didn't know before. Jack Daniel's story began in the year 1849 in the small Tennessee town of Lynchburg. It's not clear what year it was, which makes his story a little more mysterious. In those days, birth records were not always kept correctly, especially for families who lived in the country. Jack's family was no different. It was hard for them to make ends meet because they were poor farmers living in bad conditions. Lucy Cook and Callaway Daniel had 13 children, and Jack was the youngest. It was not easy to be in such a big family. The Daniels worked hard and counted on farming to make a living. The whole family had to help out to keep things going. It was hard for farming families to live in Tennessee in the middle of the 1800s because there were not many tools and there were a lot of problems. Even though they had a lot of problems, Jack's parents did everything they could to take care of their kids. They worked hard to give the family food, a place to live, and anything else they needed. Callaway, Jack's father, was eager to teach his children good values. Lucinda, Jack's mother, was the center of the family and made sure everyone stuck together. But bad things happened to Jack early in his life. He was very young when his mother died. Any kid would be devastated to lose a parent, but Jack's was even worse. When his mother died, it left a huge hole in the family. Life got even harder without her. As if that was not bad enough, the Civil War started soon after. Tennessee was in a lot of trouble because of the war, which broke up families and towns. Callaway, Jack's dad, died in the war, leaving the kids to take care of themselves. There were 2 deaths in Jack's family before he was a boy. He was a lost child with no one to turn to for help or a clear way to move forward. Jack Daniel's life took a strange turn after he lost both of his parents. A friend named Dan Call took him in. Now, Dan was not like most guardians. Not only was he a preacher who led Sunday services and gave spiritual advice, but he was also a businessman with an odd side job. Dan owned a small brewery on his land where he made whiskey. Back then, making whiskey was a normal part of life in the South. Not only was it a way to make money, it was almost like a ritual. A lot of families had their own recipes and ways of brewing. People always had whiskey on hand, and it was often used for business, medicine, or even to bring people together in the community. Dan Call's distillery was both a business and a hobby for him. Jack would become interested in the world of whiskey because of this. Jack was naturally interested because he was a tough and driven kid. He started to hang out at the brewery and watch Dan and his crew do their thing. He was interested in how raw materials like corn, rye, and barley could be turned into a golden smooth drink. The young boy thought that the steam, the boiling mash, and the smell of grains fermenting were all like magic. Dan chose to teach Jack how to make whiskey because he saw how excited Jack was about it. He knew Jack was different because he had a smart mind and a strong desire to learn. Jack did more than just watch. He asked questions, wrote things down, and got his hands dirty. Dan saw right away that this kid could do more than just help out around the brewery. Dan was not Jack's only teacher, though. Nathan Nearest Green would have an even bigger impact on Jack's future. The master distiller, who was very skilled and knew a lot about making whiskey, was the closest person. Dan put Jack in touch with Nearest, and the 2 of them became friends. Nearest became Jack's teacher and taught him the finer points of the trade. They also shared methods that would become the basis of Jack Daniel's whiskey. Nathan Nearest Green is a man whose impact on Jack Daniel's life and the history of whiskey making is hard to overstate. A man named Nearest Green was a slave who worked for Dan Call. But he was not just any worker. He was Call's master brewer. His skill at making whiskey was unmatched, and many people looked up to him for it. Nearest knew everything there was to know about the craft, from choosing the grains to fermentation to distillation. His help would be very useful. If you are enjoying watching this video so far, do appreciate us by liking, sharing, and subscribing to our channel. It will boost our morale too. 0. Coming back to Jack Daniel's story. When Dan Call put young Jack Daniel in touch with Nearest, it was the start of a relationship that would change Daniel's life. Nearest saw that Jack was eager to learn and thought the determined boy had a lot of promise. Jack was naturally interested, but Nearest taught him how to use that interest in a useful way. He took Jack under his wing and taught him how to make whiskey slowly and carefully. Most of Nearest's lessons were covered in detail. He taught Jack how to pick the best grains for the mash so that the taste would go well together. He taught Jack how to watch and control the chemical reactions that turned everyday ingredients into something amazing by explaining the fermentation process. Nearest taught Jack more than just basic skills. He also taught him how important it is to be precise and consistent and respect the craft. The Lincoln County process was one of the most important things Nearest taught Jack. In this one-of-a-kind method, the whiskey was filtered through charcoal before it was aged in barrels. Using charcoal to filter the whiskey got rid of any impurities and gave it its smooth, rich taste. To make Tennessee whiskey different from other types of whiskey, like bourbon, this step became an important part of the process. Jack didn't just learn these skills, they were a revelation to him. Making whiskey was not just a job, it was an art. Jack was interested in the flavors that could be changed and improved, the care that was needed to do each step perfectly, and the pleasure of making something truly unique. He not only learned how to do it, he fell in love with it. But Nearest and Jack were not just students and teachers. They had a very special bond. They became partners because they respected each other and shared a desire. Even though there were a lot of social and racial barriers at the time, they stayed friends. Nearest was more to Jack than just a teacher. He was also a partner and an influence. Jack Daniel was no longer just an interested student in making whiskey by the time he was a teenager. He had become a skilled artist. Because Dan Call supported Jack and Nearest Green helped him a lot, Jack felt ready to take the plunge and open his brewery. For someone so young, it was a big step. But Jack's drive and love for the craft gave him the courage to follow his dream. Jack's first job was to find the right spot for his distillery. In Lynchburg, Tennessee, he found it near a limestone cave spring. This was not a choice made by chance. The water from the rock spring was naturally clean and free of iron, which can make whiskey taste bad. Because it was high in minerals, it was perfect for distillation and gave Jack's product a clean, crisp base. This water, Jack knew, would be one of the main things that would make his whiskey unique. In 1866, Jack registered his brewery, which was an important event in history. Jack bought what would become known as the first approved distillery in the United States when he was only 16 years old. This important event showed that Jack was both an enterprising person and someone who knew how to do things the right way. By getting a license, Jack made sure that his business was legal and followed the rules, which set the bar for the whole industry. Jack's distillery wasn't just a business, it was a dream come true. As his master distiller, Nearest Green helped Jack make whiskey that would stand out for being smooth and full of taste. He used water from a limestone spring to make the whiskey. The distillery quickly turned into a busy place, and Jack was in charge of everything to make sure that each batch met his exacting standards. This time was the start of a tradition that would spread far beyond Lynchburg. Not only was Jack Daniel making whiskey, but he also set the stage for a worldwide phenomenon. It all began with a young boy, the help of a mentor, and a limestone spring. Jack Daniel was not only good at making great whiskey, but he was also very smart when it came to business. He quickly learned that having great whiskey wasn't enough to make him successful. He also needed a brand that would stand out and be remembered. Jack came up with some new, amazing ideas that were ahead of their time to make his goods stand out. Making his bottles in a unique square shape was one of his bravest moves. It was not just for looks. The square form stood for honesty and fairness, which Jack really valued. He wanted people to think of his whiskey as reliable and high quality. The design made his bottles stand out on the shelves and caught people's eyes right away. Jack didn't stop there. He also made the famous black and white label. The whiskey looked classy and classic because of its simple but beautiful design. Many of Jack's rivals stuck to boring, plain packaging at the time. Jack's branding changed everything. People would remember the whiskey even before they took their first sip because of the professional and high-class look of the package. For a young business owner, Jack's branding decisions were risky, but he had a clear idea of what he wanted his product to do. He wasn't just selling booze, he was also making a name for himself. Jack knew that every little thing, from the design of the bottle to the fonts on the label, told a story about his values and his drive to do his best. Jack cared about his business because he wanted to leave a lasting impression, not just stand out. He wanted Jack Daniel's whiskey to be more than just a drink. He wanted it to be an experience and a sign of character and quality. By making these choices, they set the stage for one of the most famous and respected whiskey names in the world. Jack Daniel's whiskey was not like any other drink on the market. It was unique. The secret was in how well and creatively each bottle was made. The Lincoln County process, which uses charcoal to filter whiskey, made it smoother than any other whiskey by getting rid of impurities and bringing out its rich, mellow taste. Then it was aged just right in carefully chosen oak barrels, giving the whiskey a taste that stood out from the rest. Folks quickly became aware of it. People all over Tennessee quickly heard about this great whiskey. Local bars and restaurants couldn't get enough of it, and Jack's name became a sign of quality. But Jack didn't think it was enough to be a neighborhood favorite. He was sure that his offering was special and wanted everyone to see what made it special. Jack knew how important it was to be known, so he set his goals on whiskey competitions as a way to show off his skills. At the World's Fair in St. Louis in 1904, one of the most important events took place. This wasn't any old event. It was a global showcase of innovation and greatness that drew the best people from all over the world. Jack was sure of his Tennessee whiskey because he knew that its taste and quality could compete with anything in the world. The judges were shocked. Out of all the entries, Jack Daniel's Tennessee whiskey stood out and won a gold award for its great taste and quality. Not only was this win a big deal for Jack, it was also a turning point for his business. The gold award made Jack Daniel's even more well-known as one of the world's best whiskeys. After that, the name Jack Daniel's became famous all over the world, not just in Lynchburg or Tennessee. Jack's whiskey became a symbol of American workmanship and a reminder of what can be done when you work hard, love what you do, and refuse to settle for anything less than the best. Jack Daniel was not just a whiskey maker. He was a real person who, despite being short, was bigger than life. Jack was short. He was only 5 feet 2 inches, but his energy was huge. He always looked great in well-tailored suits and his signature cowboy hat, which gave him a sophisticated yet charming Southern look. If you are enjoying watching Jack Daniel's success story, don't miss out on other amazing success business stories we have covered on this channel. These are going to be really helpful for you. Go, check it out. Back to the story. Jack's quick temper was as much a part of who he was as his whiskey. Many people knew him for being very smart and determined, which helped him as a businessman and entrepreneur. But they also made him a little less predictable. Jack was known for having a short fuse, and it would sometimes get the best of him. In one of Jack's most famous stories, a safe that seemed normal turns out to be the thing that brings him down. Jack had the password to the safe in his office, but he forgot it a lot of the time, which was frustrating. When he failed again to open the safe one day, he lost his anger. Jack kicked the safe very hard when he was mad. His foot was hurt by the contact, and the wound wouldn't heal. Over time, an illness spread to the wound and made it worse, which killed him in 1911. The story shows how brave and stubborn Jack was, 2 traits that defined him throughout his life. The story of the safe has become part of Jack Daniel's legend, even after he has died. It is a funny and sad memory of the man who made the famous whiskey. Jack's attitude was just as unique as the whiskey he made. His story will live on in the hearts of everyone who heard it. He was more than just a distiller. He was a Southern genius who will never be forgotten. Throughout his life, Jack Daniel was always very thankful to Nearest Green for teaching him how to make whiskey. Jack never forgot how important Nearest was to his journey, and he made sure that his mentor's impact was felt throughout the distillery. Nearest Green wasn't just Jack's teacher. He and his family became an important part of Jack Daniel's story, and changed it in deep ways. Nearest made a lot of efforts that went beyond teaching technical skills. He shared his knowledge, innovation, and love for the craft, which were key to the success of the whiskey. Because Jack knew this, he kept Nearest and his family involved with running the distillery. This built a bond based on mutual respect and working together. The Green family was still very important to the company after Jack's death. Many of Nearest's children and grandchildren worked at Jack Daniel's, keeping on his high standards. Their participation showed how mentoring can have a permanent effect and how important it is to recognize those who help others. In the past few years, Jack Daniel's has done a lot to talk about Nearest Green's part in its history. His work was once ignored, but now it is openly recognized and praised as crucial to the success of the business. The honor includes a memorial to Nearest at the distillery, so people can learn about the important role he played in making one of the most famous whiskeys in the world. When you look at Nearest's story along with Jack's, you can see how important mentorship, friendship, and a common goal can be. It's the story of two men from very different backgrounds who work together to make something amazing, something that still inspires and speaks to people today. Jack Daniel's is the most popular American whiskey in the world right now. Millions of people in more than 170 countries enjoy it. It has become more than just a drink because of its unique taste and long past. It has become a cultural icon. Everywhere you look, you can see Jack Daniel's whiskey. It's on neon signs in bars in Nashville and Europe at music events. Not only do whiskey lovers love it, but it has also come to represent quality, custom, and the spirit of craftsmanship that Jack Daniel fought for. The history of Jack Daniel's is one of progress, persistence, and a strong desire to create something unique. What began as a small distillery in Lynchburg, Tennessee, is now a name that is known all over the world for being the best. Every bottle of Jack Daniel's whiskey tells a story about Jack's dream, his work with Nearest Green, and the tradition that lives on today. People drink Jack Daniel's whiskey everywhere. From a quiet corner bar to a packed concert, it's a part of society and a sign of a lasting dedication to quality. People come from all over the world to see the original brewery in Lynchburg, which is still in business today. A lot of people come to the cute town to go on tours, learn about the past of the brand, and see the distillation process up close. Fans of the whiskey make the trip to the distillery, which gives them a unique look into the history and innovation that Jack Daniel started more than 100 years ago. Jack Daniel picked the limestone cave spring because it has clean, iron-free water, and it still flows. It's still an important part of every bottle of Jack Daniel's whiskey, just like it was when Jack started the company. A big part of what makes Jack Daniel's whiskey so special is the water, which is still as clean as ever. It's proof of Jack Daniel's long-lasting heritage and the classic quality of the whiskey he made. Jack Daniel's is more than just a booze company. It's about being strong, working hard, and always believing that dreams can come true. There was no wealth or fame for Jack Daniel. He was an orphan who had nothing to his name when he was born. But he turned his life around by being tough and determined. He built a whole business, not just a distillery. Making the best whiskey wasn't enough for him to be successful. He also had to build a brand that people would associate with quality, history, and hard work. Jack's story was not simple or smooth. It had its ups and downs. He lost his parents very young and had to raise himself alone. Even though things were hard for Jack, he used them to drive him to follow his dream. People who believed in him taught him how to make whiskey, and over time, he made something that changed the world of whiskey for good. Jack Daniel's was more than just a brand. It was a legacy, a sign of American spirit, hard work, and drive. Millions of people around the world enjoy it now, and its past continues to inspire new generations. So, the next time you raise a glass of Jack Daniel's, think about the man who made it. If you enjoyed watching the video, do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Hey, don't forget to check out our amazing existing videos on the channel. See you soon in another video.